Coming up next on the program, another right place, right time story. The filmmaker Richard Hendrick happened to be in Chihuahua, Mexico when a revered Rarámuri shaman asked him to record a kind of deathbed message to his people. Richard then had to figure out what he had on film and what he was going to do with it. That's next. I'm Dick Gordon from APM, American Public Media. This is The Story. I'm Dick Gordon. This is The Story. The Rarámuri people live in the hard desert of Chihuahua, Mexico. Theirs has always been a life of coping with drought, and now it's also illegal loggers and drug cartels. But they see things with a long view, still moving with the seasons and embracing their tradition of long-distance running. Richard Hendrick was invited to visit them with a friend who is helping the Rarámuri with their land rights. Well, it was a 2.5-day hike through a canyon that's bigger than the Grand Canyon, and Richard, who's a filmmaker, was packing a lot of his gear. When they arrived, Richard was invited to meet an elderly shaman, and they spoke as the man called Augustine washed his clothes in a stream.
He's a beautiful man, very leathered skin, a lot of white hair. He was wearing pretty traditional clothing, and that's unusual. And even though this community is so remote, the women all wear traditional dress, but the men basically wear sort of Western dress with cowboy hats and jeans. But he was more traditionally dressed and quick to smile. He was wearing a ski cap, and it was only later after I interviewed him that I noticed on the footage that along the front of the cap it said penthouse. So there has been contact here.
Probably an association lost on somewhere in between.
I'm sure he had no idea what that was.
So what were you thinking? That this was a place you'd like to come back to with a film crew?
Yes, but those plans were, based on trying to raise enough money to do a documentary, which, as you probably know, is quite expensive.
Yeah.
But after we were back for just a few weeks, we got word from one of the people who worked with this NGO, which is called the Sierra Madre Alliance, that Augustine had come to him, had remembered us, and Augustine felt that he was ready to die. I think some of his contemporaries had died, and he felt his time on Earth was coming to an end, and he wanted to know if it was possible for us to come back down. I'm sure he didn't realize what that meant, but to come back down and record his words so that he could leave them behind.
Isn't it interesting that he would have an interest in having his words recorded by, camera, tape recorder, whatever, and like that mattered to him, right?
Yeah, it was fascinating. And, of course, it took us a few seconds to decide that's what we were going to do. So we were packing up immediately, and I think we were down there within, maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Richard Hendrick says his main goal was to let the shaman speak. He was intrigued and convinced that the man did have something important to say. Augustine spoke directly to the camera. Richard felt that he had captured something, but he didn't know what Augustine said. When he got back to the States, he sent a copy of the interview to Mexico for translation, but he heard nothing back. He then tried to track down translators who spoke Rarámuri. He even went back to Chihuahua to get people to help, but those translations lacked specifics. Richard had a feeling that the essence of what was said was still not there, and this went on for 9 years. Finally, though, he had something he felt he could share with the community, and it was time to travel back into the desert.
When I had everything ready and we scheduled a time, which was originally going to be in October of last fall, but then we realized that was at the height of the marijuana harvesting season, which meant that it was a dangerous time to be in this particular part of the world.
Anywhere on a road or a trail, right?
Yeah. I mean, on top of everything else, Chihuahua is a very, very dangerous state. It's one of the most dangerous in Mexico, and it's where, for instance, Juarez is, which is the murder capital of the world now.
And the Rarámuri would probably be caught up in a little bit of fighting for land or peace or leave us alone with the narcos, right?
Yes. In fact, this particular community has had serious problems for more than a decade with a combination of things. Illegal loggers have come in and logged their land. As I said, this is some of the last old-growth pine and oak forest in the Sierra Madre Occidental. And so illegal loggers come in, log the land, and then narco traffickers come in and force them to grow marijuana and poppies on this cleared land. And if they don't, they kill them. So this has been a really, really serious problem down there. And we were always with people who were our armed guards when we were down there. So anyhow, we postponed it until November. And then, again, as I said, there was an uncomfortable realization of just what logistics were involved here. This is an extremely remote community. I needed to get electricity in there somehow, which meant generators and batteries. I needed to get a screen large enough for, 100 or 200 people to watch. We needed to bring our food in for however long we were going to be there. So, I sort of gathered a team together of 4 or 5 people and plus all the people that were associated with Sierra Madre Alliance. And we knew it was going to take, 15 to 20 hours to get in. So we left one afternoon from Chihuahua and we drove on paved roads for, 10 hours or so. Got to the hotel we were supposed to be staying at, 13 of us, I believe it was. Of course, there are no phones in these little hotels on these small roads, so we had no reservations, and they were booked for some reason. No one knows quite why that happened. But so this is probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and so we drove a little further and found another little restaurant hotel, and they were shut down and dark, but we woke them up, and they spent an hour cleaning 5 rooms for us, and it was very cold that night, and some of us slept in cars, and at least one of us slept in a sleeping bag out on a veranda. And in the middle of the night, it started pouring rain. Now, it hadn't rained down there for years, basically. And I thought, we're in huge trouble now. So it rained all night long. It was
this logging road is going to be completely impassable at this point, right?
Exactly. So we got on the road, and it was horrible. It was slick and scary, and this is the absolute sheer drop-offs on one side and cliffs on the other. And there were a couple of moments when I wasn't sure any of us were going to make it, but we did, and we made it in, and the community began to come in. You could see them straggling in, and pretty soon we had a couple of hundred people in this big area, and I'm thinking, boy, an hour and 45 minutes watching this in the cold is going to be a real
you've got
test.
to do it at night because there's no place inside for you to screen it, right?
Exactly. Uh-huh. So I brought down a screen that we could build. It was 9 feet by 12 feet, and we had batteries and generators and a projector and speakers, and I'm very nervous, and it's beginning to get to be dusk, and I'm thinking we ought to start, and then all of a sudden everybody is sort of disappearing, and I learned that a very special ceremony is taking place a few hundred meters away, and so we all go over there, and they're dancing what's called a matachine, which is a very special dance. They dance for especially ceremonies around the dead, and it's also a peyote ceremony. And it turned out that they had decided to do that because the director of Sierra Madre Alliance had lost someone very close to her the week before that they had learned about. So they did this ceremony for her. And
you're like weeks invested in this screening, exactly. And you're going, there's nobody around.
Yeah, exactly. So that lasted for an hour or so, and then everybody starts straggling back. It's dark now. We have everything set up, and now they've built fires because they're cold. So they're standing and sitting around fires, and we finally fire up the projector, and off we go.
Actually, sounds like quite a magical moment, right? To be in that place, even though it's cold, to have the fires and the film of this now, long dead shaman speaking to them.
Yes, and I was a bit worried. That last meeting I had down there in September before this, it dawned on me that. And I asked the governor how many people he thought had ever seen a television or a movie. And he thought, out of 600, maybe 100, maybe fewer. And I thought, wow, there are all these anthropological stories of people not being able to recognize their own photograph because they'd never seen a two-dimensional depiction of themselves. And I thought, wow, these people are not only going to see a moving two-dimensional image, but it's going to be an image of a person that was very revered by them, who's dead for 8 years, 9 years, and is speaking to them. So I thought this could be disconcerting.
There may be stuff here that I don't expect. What happened?
Well, they seemed fine with it. I mean, I don't know what was going on inside their heads, but one of the things I suggested we do was to create some posters that we could put around the community, a couple of weeks before we came down, just so they'd see a larger-than-life depiction of him, and that they would, relate somehow to this. So I don't know that any of them were scared. No one ran off, and they actually seemed to be engaged in it. They would laugh at certain points, but they stuck with it. Absolutely stuck with it. An hour and 45 minutes in this freezing weather, and it was, spectacular setting. I mean, there are these wonderful forests around us, and hills and stars so bright that it was difficult to pick out constellations because so many other stars were out, and you never see anything like it. So when it was over, they had organized what's called a tesquinado, a giant party, basically. They drink a homemade corn mash beer called Tesquino at almost any occasion, and they drink a lot of it. And so they had organized this big party for this to celebrate the return of Augustine's words. And it was also going to be a rather reverential peyote ceremony as well. And this took place, maybe a quarter mile away, up in the hills at someone's house. And everyone went up there. 150 people went up there, and it was, it was pre-Hispanic. It was they were dancing the Matachini again in costume. There was a big fire. They had sacrificed a cow, and they were about to sacrifice a goat. They did peyote ceremonies. And I left at probably midnight, and a couple of my team stayed on until, 2 or 3 in the morning. And we woke up the next day and started packing up some of our things and straggled back up to this party site, and they were still going, completely partying at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Did you ever find out, what the sort of distillation of his message to his people was?
I don't know if I can distill it. There were so many different sort of disparate messages. I mean, sometimes he'd be talking about the difficulties that they were having now, and that they felt it was because they were not paying respect to the natural world. They particularly blamed that on what they called the Chibochis, which is sort of a term for gringo. It's not necessarily a pejorative term, but they call basically any outsiders Chibochis. But in this case, they were feeling that the non-Raramuri had treated the forest badly, had treated the ecology badly, and that they were paying for it, and that the gods were not happy with that, and so that they were kind of punishing them. He felt that the kind of end of the earth was coming, and that it would be sort of purified by everything being destroyed, and then the earth would be born new again. So that was one of his messages, that they had to be careful of what the environment was going to do.
It's pretty strong
Quite interesting.
Stuff.
Yeah. When he was speaking, that was 9 years ago. Now, things were already serious in terms of the drought down there, but it's gotten 9 years more serious since then. And yet at that time he was saying, we need to be careful. And even in my lifetime, I've seen what's happened to the environment. And that for me, is something that we need to be telling people all over the world. And the Raramuri are in terrible trouble right now. They've had total crop failures, which means for subsistence farmers, of course, that they have nothing to eat. So, in fact, the government and NGOs have been bringing food into these people now for the last year. So I think his warnings are as important as anything else.
Richard Hendrick has made a film about the shaman Augustine in the Raramuri community of Mexico, and we'll have a link on our website at thestory.org.